Okay, today's the 24th day of Tevis, the Yortzeit, the day of fasting of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, and the 24th of January. And so we're continuing here in Mitzvahs Kiddush HaChodesh, Daf Samach Tet Amud Aleph. So yesterday we began to see how you translate this whole idea of Chodesh being Malchus, that the moon is the kingdom, and on Rosh Chodesh it goes before Abba by itself. It doesn't need the Zah. It doesn't need its husband, as it were. It goes by itself. And in Chassidus, what this means is that the Malchus is our speech. And speech is always revelation of something. And we'll see this more today. And the speech can come either normally through the emotions, or through a higher state that it goes directly through the mind. So the emotions would be the husband of the speech, that would be the Zah, and the speech would be the Malchus. And Abba, the mind, is the source of the emotions and the source of the speech. It's the source of both. Except that normally it goes through the emotions, then goes to the speech, and on Rosh Chodesh the Malchus goes up by itself, and so it can receive directly from the mind. So what are examples of this two types of speech? So we would say that when a person is normally speaking, so he's speaking out of his emotions, we said. So I didn't say the simple explanation is that most people, when they speak, they're revealing their emotions. They're not revealing their mind. Meaning most of the speech that's going on in the world, especially for regular people, is a revelation of emotions. It's cries of excitement, and so that's why some people don't do very well with regular banter. Because regular banter is about emotions, really. It's not a discussion of anything. And if you mistake it for a discussion of something intellectual, then you're miscommunicating. There's nothing intellectual going on. Most people are just expressing their emotions. But then most people also have jobs, and maybe on their job they also have to speak directly from their mind. So, like for instance, you're having a discussion about some engineering topic, or you're talking about some intellectual topic. You're talking about politics, maybe even in politics. You can say most of the discussions are emotional. They're not intellectual. They're not coming from there. But the thing now he added yesterday is that the 6 days of action, the weekdays, we call the 6 Yemei HaMaaseh, the days of action, are when Malchus receives from the emotions. Why do we call these days? Because the word day in and of itself implies revelation. Because Yom, Yom, God called the light day. So light, like we said, open your mouth and your words will shine out. So that means that Yom is related to revealing something. And Shabbat, Yom Shabbat, I once heard a very, very big rabbi who happens to be the brother of the last 3 chief rabbis. Won't mention which one of the 7 brothers he is. And he came out against people calling it Yom Shabbat. He didn't like the fact that they called it a Yom, like every other day. What do you mean? But that's Yom Shabbat. That's how the Torah describes it. He couldn't understand what in the world he wanted. Yom Shabbat. He couldn't stand it was called Yom Shabbat. Shabbat is just Shabbat. No, it's Yom Shabbat. So Yom Shabbat is a revelation of speech that comes directly from the intellect. So what is this saying? It's saying that on Shabbat you're speaking from the intellect, not from the emotions. It's a different type of speech. Okay. And the main type of work that we do is during the 6 days. What's the work there? So he says it's the Sur Merav Aseh Tov, 3 lines from the bottom in the original. I don't know what it's like here in the 16. Okay. שיש באדם כל היום שזהו עיקר הבירורים, והוא בא מחמת רשים ומאהבה או יראה שהיה לו בתפילה שהם מקורים לבירור זה. So he says most of the work that people do on their emotions is meant to clarify them, to fix them. Why does Hashem want us to speak about our emotions? Because that's supposed to be the rectification of the emotions. You speak about them in order to rectify them. So he says, where do you get the power to rectify it? Maybe it's just your emotions are just forcing you to say what you say. So he says this comes from the davening. When a person was davening in Shachris in the morning, So the Ava and Yira that he has for Hashem, that is its residue is the ingredient that clarifies the emotions through the speech. But again, it turns out that the speech is cathartic. It's a way of clarifying the emotions. It's a way of getting out the emotions in the right way. And that's how we do it. And normally, the big deal was that when you were speaking during a davening, the emotions that you had during the davening was being received from the mind. So here we see this is the regular way that it goes, that the emotions are supposed to receive from the mind, from the through the speech is supposed to be. Sorry, I didn't say it right. That the speech is supposed to receive from the emotions that are receiving from the mind. So that's why we call Maaseh is always Tikkun. Asher bara Elokim la'asot. That God, at the end of the account of creation, says that Hashem created all this to do. And how does Unklus translate to do? And Asot, letaken, to rectify. And the sages in Chagiga, they say, what does it mean? It means that everything in the world needs to be fixed. It's not finished. Nothing's finished. It's up to man to finish it. It's up to man to bring it to a state of rectification.
Well, what do we're talking about the midos. There's nefesh ba'amit, nefesh elokit. Now, in the beginning we said it's really nefesh ba'amit. You're just talking. Yishrei kranot. They're just talking.
Right.
But what's going here, I understand, is nefesh elokit, which draws from the sechel. That is able to influence the emotions,
and then during the day, hopefully that becomes the secret ingredient. Right. But we don't call Rosh Chodesh a day of action. It's not a day of work. Even though there's no prohibition against doing work on Rosh Chodesh, everything is a regular day. And where do we learn this from? That Rosh Chodesh is not called a day of work. We learn this from the interaction between Yonatan and David. And there, David is in a very precarious situation with Shaul, with Yonatan's father, King Saul. This is 1 Samuel 18:19. And they want to meet up. And Yonatan's going to gauge how his father feels about David by bringing up the fact that he's not there, that he didn't come for the Suda of Rosh Chodesh, he didn't come for the festive meal of Rosh Chodesh. And when he says that, he says, we'll come to the place where you were hidden in one of the work days. Meaning the Rosh Chodesh, when they're going to meet up after Yonatan gauges his father's reaction, is not a work day. That's the source. So it's not a work day. Because on that day, on Rosh Chodesh, the speech of Hashem, again, Malchus, the feminine, goes up to the light of Father to receive without the emotions. Now, just out of curiosity, one would ask, so this is all very nice, this is all very spiritual. What do we see from this in reality? What do you see from this in reality? So it's a very interesting thing, what we see. What happens to the moon on Rosh Chodesh? It's gone. It's missing in action. So why is that a sign that it's receiving directly from Abba? Everything we know about Chassidus, because Abba is bittul. Abba is nullification. So the interesting thing is that when you're being influenced directly from the mind, when the speech is being directly influenced from the mind, there's no feeling of being. There's no sense of self. Meaning when you're speaking from the emotions, even if it's very rectified, the emotions are still yesh. There's still something. So then you would see the moon. You would see in the speech, you would see the feeling of being. What's the opposite of Rosh Chodesh? The middle of the month, the 15th day of the month. What happens on that day? The moon's completely full. So the full moon is a sense of being. Okay? And the missing moon, the moon that you can't see, that's the sense of non-being, of self-nullification. And that happens on the first day of the month. So it's very interesting. When can you have a solar eclipse? Only when? on the first day of the month. There's something people don't know about solar eclipses. It can only be when because why don't we see it? Because the moon is on the side of the sun, so we can't see it because it's not reflecting anything. If the moon was transparent, we'd see light coming through it anyway. But because it's not transparent, it's opaque, so when it's on the side of the sun, and that's when it can eclipse it, but usually it's either higher or lower, so it doesn't eclipse. So that's when you can get an eclipse. When do you get a lunar eclipse? Only on the 15th of the month. Only when the moon is directly in front of the right on the other side of the earth from the sun. So the first of the month, it's always on the exact same side as the sun, either higher or lower most of the time, which is why you don't get an eclipse. But it's on the same side, and then you can't see it. So this is the astronomical equivalent of what he's saying. So what does this mean? It means that the sun is Abba. The sun in our diagram here, this astronomical observation is like the father, and that's how we understand it, because the sun is the light, right? Okay. לפי שבו עליו כן, פירוש כנ"ל, במשל שהדיבור מקבל מעצמות חוכמה עליונה שלא על ידי התלבשותה במידות, ואז הדיבור בבחינת ביטול יותר מאת קבלתו מן המידות. And like we just said, and then the speech has a lot more self-nullification. So when you're speaking directly from the mind, it's very different than speaking from the emotions. Meaning, again, it doesn't mean that from the emotions there's no mind. He says it's just an enclosement of the mind first in the emotions, and then it goes to the speech, and then it's revealed. But if you're able to speak directly from the mind, there's a lot more sense of self-nullification.
What's the difference between Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh? I didn't understand. What's Shabbos?
Shabbos, it receives directly from the mind.
Okay, and so what's the difference with that and Rosh Chodesh?
Rosh Chodesh also, it's like Shabbos in a certain sense. But we said that the difference between them is that on Shabbos it still goes with a Zah. Okay? It still has Zah. Because Shabbos can be any day of the week. It's not necessarily when the moon is on the side of the sun. It can be, you have 4 Shabboses every month. So it's still receiving in some sense from the midos. In our if you're asking astronomically, the midos, the Zah would be the earth. Okay. So it's still a lot of the light that the moon has is from the earth. By the way, that's also true on the first of the month. When we can't see it completely, you can still see the moon with a telescope. Why? Because it's still it's receiving a little bit of light being reflected from the earth. So it's a very good question. Astronomically, we see this also. Okay, so we'll end here. Continue on Sunday.